Welcome to Fundraising Stories with Female Founders. I'm Julia Elliott-Brown, the founder and CEO of Enter the Arena. I'm a serial entrepreneur and an expert in raising investment and business growth. Our mission at Enter the Arena is to empower female founders to fly through pre-raise and investment and onto the exponential growth of their business with investment expertise and business coaching. Here we share the stories of inspirational female founders who've raised investment to inspire you to do the same. You'll hear their honest accounts of what it was really like to secure funding, the highs, the lows, and the challenges they experienced on the journey. And along the way, we'll discuss top tips for how you can be successful too. Today I'm talking with Savannah de Savary, the founder and CEO of BuiltID. Now, BuiltID is a very cool tech platform in the property tech sector that allows local communities, property developers and local authorities to visualise and get feedback and input on property development projects. And I'll let Savannah tell you more about it in a second. But the reason why it's important is it means that property developers don't just invest in bricks and mortar, they invest in their communities too, which is super important. Savannah graduated from the University of Oxford in 2013, after which she joined Thor Equities, where she managed real estate development projects in New York City. So she's got a wealth of experience in this sector. And just 2 years later, in June 2015, she founded BuiltID. Savannah's already won numerous awards and accolades, including Young Entrepreneur of the Year at the Property Awards, Property Week's Power 100 Top 20 Ones to Watch, and one of the top 20 proptech influencers in a poll by the UK Proptech Association. She's also a regular columnist for Property Week. And to top all of that, Savannah raised £2 million in equity investment to help her grow the business quite recently, and has raised in total of almost £4 million. So I'm sure you're all as intrigued as I am to hear more about BuiltID, and in particular how Savannah raised her investment round. So welcome, Savannah. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's great to see you. So tell us a bit more about BuiltID, because I'm sure I did a terrible job of explaining it. How did you come up with the idea, and how does it all work?
So I came up with the idea for BuiltID just by being in the property industry and growing frustrated with how much of a closed industry it was. It really is an all boys club in many ways, and it's pretty opaque. And that frustration grew, and I founded BuiltID, where originally we showcased all of the projects, the leading consultants and developers, showcasing their track record, so you could see who's behind projects, who you want to work with, what the best precedent is from around the world. And a couple of years ago, I was approached by someone from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government who said, you have all this, all this data that shows examples of how positive property development can be. We have a housing crisis, we're struggling with community engagement. Is there a way you could leverage this to help with that? And I was looking for a way to monetize the platform. I felt very strongly that I shouldn't monetize this, membership database where people can showcase what they do, nor people being able to find them, because that would undermine the whole ethos of democratizing the process and making it open to everyone. And so I had a very long train journey to a hen party, and I set about thinking up an idea for how we could actually leverage this data and leverage this visual platform to help with community engagement. And that's what we came up with, and we launched it in April, and now we're working on around 30 projects, which are working to get planning to deliver around 25,000 homes. And on average, we get around 2,000 people in the community voting and engaging and sharing feedback on the development scheme, and actually ultimately shaping what gets built in that community. So yeah, it's pretty exciting.
That's really amazing. So give us an example perhaps of a kind of project that you might work and how the community can influence what that property development looks like.
Sure. So we work on a range of projects. So a project in the private sector, we'd be working for a developer, for example, who's trying to build a new mixed-use scheme. So maybe they're trying to build housing above, and then they have the ground floor where they want some sort of commercial use. So they would use us to find out exactly what the concerns are of the community, what their priorities are, what the neighbourhood's currently lacking, and then find out what does the community need from that ground floor space. Do they need more retail, or do they actually need more community space? Do they need something to help get youths off the streets? What are the needs that will make this actually work for the existing community, not just the incoming sort of residents? Also, the public space. Do they need a playground or an outdoor gym? Do they want a water fountain, or actually they want something more practical and functional to be able to go and sit and eat their lunch? Do they want markets being used in that space? What do they need to make this a beneficial, productive part of their community? The design, how tall it is, what sort of mix of housing it should have, whether it should be for young professionals, bigger apartments for families, whether it should be affordable housing. That's all the sort of things that you can shape and influence. Equally, we do the same for the local councils. We're about to launch a project where it's actually about how the council spend the community infrastructure levy, which is the money that they get given by developers, in order to be able to develop in that neighbourhood. So the idea is that money is meant to go towards building infrastructure for the community and actually letting the community have a say and be empowered to choose how that money is spent. Is it spent on the pavement, on new traffic lights, on health infrastructure? What does it need? And actually, they're the local experts ultimately, and giving them the voice to shape what happens.
That's amazing, so powerful. And I know that you have a kind of gamification element to it and a charity angle too. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, so we're a social impact tech company. It's very much at the heart of what we do. So firstly, our pricing works per project, and we work at a significant discount for the public sector, for anyone doing affordable housing, and also for NGOs who want to build social infrastructure and want to use us to be able to empower a local community who are the recipient of those funds to actually say what they need to be built to make their community better. We also, though, make sure that at the heart of the platform is a social impact. So the more people vote, the more points they accrue. So we use game mechanics in order to make it more fun to engage with it. And so every time you share feedback or vote on a different option for the scheme, you gain a point. And at the end, you get to donate your points to one of 3 hyper-local social initiatives that the developer or the local council have selected. So this could be a local community centre, it could be, a sports team, it could be repairing the town hall roof, it could be whatever you want, or a local homeless shelter, etc. But if charity A got 62% of the points, they get 62% of the pot of money set aside by the developer, or actually a volunteering hours that the developer set aside to go and spend time in that community and actually, be an active presence constructing it.
That is super clever. I absolutely love what you're doing.
Yeah.
So going back to the beginning, and you talked about sort of, you had an idea. Was it you and other people? And tell us a bit more about those early days, how you got it off the ground. Because I imagine that the start was about building the technology.
Yeah, so no, I'm a sole founder, and when I first came up with the idea, I was lucky enough to be having dinner with a female mentor who's one of the few prominent property developers in New York. I think she was trying to set me up with her nephew. Unfortunately, he did not get a word in edgewise at the table. So I said, look, we've had this idea, what do you think? And she loved it, and she said, I could use that for the past 30 years. If you build a prototype, I'll probably invest. I think my CEO would invest, and this is something that could really have legs. So I went away and I went to the executive vice president, who again was one of the very few females in the property industry in a senior position, and said, look, I've had this idea, I want to work on it. What do you think? And she said, my advice is that you don't tell anyone else, because it's a great idea and someone else could do it faster and better than you can. But you have my full support to go and do this in your spare time. As long as it doesn't interfere with your work, go and run with it. So I learned all those sort of, rudimentary skills around sketch and around prototyping and wireframing and everything else to really map out my ideas. And then I was lucky. It's all just about, sort of the random coincidence of connections you make. I'd met someone years before in Vegas, of all places, who just started a fascinating tech company called TopTal, where they have, the top freelance talent. And we'd stayed sort of email pen pals. And I emailed him and said, look, I have this idea. I've done this prototype. What do you think? Do you have someone that could help me? And he connected me with an amazing developer who eventually I bought out the contract, and he's been with me so literally since before the company was founded, and who helped me, design something. And then I had to take the leap and raise a sort of friends and family round, but it was more actually property developers who understood the problem, got it, and a little bit of friends and family money as well. And then I kept plugging on it late at night, on the weekends, whenever I could, until it got to the stage where I couldn't do my job as well as I should, and do this as well as I should at the same time. And it was only when really it was like I was being, really pushed to the limit that I took the leap and was brave enough to properly start the company. So I was not one of those amazing founders who, immediately gives up their job and goes and does it from their garage and, is very brave. I very much was of the conservative ilk of, I had the funding in place, or not enough funding to even have salary, but enough funding to, cover the tech costs. And I immediately moved into one of my investors' offices, and I had the structure, and it felt a lot safer than I think a lot of those amazing stories are. But I was 23, I had no idea what I was doing, and it was terrifying, but I haven't looked back.
But I wouldn't necessarily call that conservative. I would call that a kind of quite a calculated risk-taking, quite sensible approach, because you can kind of keep your job going whilst you get something off the ground. At least you've got an income. Test and learn, and then when you feel ready to make that leap, I think that's actually quite a sensible strategy to follow, in my view. What's interesting, what you just said actually, Savannah, is that there were two sort of important women who encouraged you to go ahead and do this and said they would back you. I'm just interested to see your thoughts on that, whether you feel that because you're a woman, they were women, that was what really made that happen. Had it been a guy in the property industry, do you think it would have been different? Or do you not think that gender comes into play in that respect?
It's hard to say. I mean, I'm not literally only mentioning the women. Those were the two defining people who helped me really get this off the ground by giving me the courage and the support that I needed. Would they have taken me under their wing in the same way if I was a man? I don't know. So I think it can go both ways. No, I don't think the male authority figures around me would have been nurturing me in that way. But equally, I don't know if those women would have been nurturing a man in that way. So I don't necessarily know where that gender comes into play, but certainly their bravery and how amazing they were made a big difference. And my parents had no idea what I was doing, were really quite, they now probably deny us, but they were very, very sort of reluctant for me to give up my stable job, and were very sort of, we don't get it and we don't really understand. And eventually my dad said, look, this woman you're going to be sitting in her office and around, even if she rubs off on you 10%, you're going to have learned so much, it's worth it. Like, I support you. I don't get what you're doing, but I support you on that basis alone. So I think just having strong figures around you, whether you're a man or a woman, who you can look up to is, so important.
Yeah, really important, and so great to see inspirational women kind of helping female founders too. I love it. So you got that kind of initial friends and family and a couple of people from the industry supporting you. So how far did that get you from a business perspective, and what was the point where you realised, okay, I'm going to have to go out and raise perhaps a bit more serious money?
Only so far. So that got me to the stage where I had a couple of interns who were just doing it from NYU in their spare time for passion, and me all plugging away at it. And it was really only when I decided I needed to properly start hiring people and building a company that I was like, I now need to figure out how to do this fundraising thing. And I was lucky that Pi Labs, who were there at the time and sort of quite new proptech specific VC, invited me to join their accelerator in London. And just a few different things that made me think that New York is a hell of a lot of fun, but it's a lot more fun when you have no responsibilities. It's less fun when you're trying to start a business and working all hours of the day or night in this transient, culture where everyone's partying and there's new people arriving all the time. And I had no idea who was in my, friendship group anymore, because I was always, locked away working. So for a lot of different reasons, London made sense, and them inviting me to join that accelerator and give me that structure was just a golden opportunity. So I joined them, and I managed to, just by harassing people non-stop over emails, eventually one of my key investors said that he decided to give me 10 seconds on the phone, and I did a pretty good 10-second pitch, and that's when he got me in. And I actually didn't realize quite how significant and influential he was in the property industry. I probably should have done more research than I had. A pivotal figure who's incredibly well respected. And I think in this industry, to have been in it a long time, and for not a single person to have a bad word to say about you, which is what I found when I did my due diligence on him, is very rare. To have a pristine reputation as someone who's smart and also decent, and is doing good things very successfully. So I was lucky that he gave me that opportunity, and I think it only honestly happened because I kept harassing him, and I was lucky. It was luck that I got in that door, and I went to that meeting, and I hadn't done enough research, so I wasn't as nervous as I should have been. And then he completely ripped my financials apart, and realised I was 23 and had no idea what I was doing. But what he said was the most important thing for him is that, unlike most founders he dealt with, who may be a bit more experienced, who always think they know the right way, when he was like, but what about if you did it this way? Or have you not considered that? I'd be like, well, that's a good point. Actually, maybe we should consider that. And maybe that would be a bit great. So it was actually, in a lot of ways, it was I was humbled because I had to be, because I really didn't know anything. That is what made a difference, is that I was willing to learn from him, made it something that he was interested in. And
just they like to see that you're open to conversation, to discussion, and it's good to have a clear view of what you want to build, but also be open to people's skills and experience to add into that.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you might end up discounting that idea, but at least to consider it. I think investors want to see that.
Exactly, yeah. And I had a very clear vision, and what he loved is he was like, you have an incredibly clear vision. You're A, you want to get to B. you think you're going to do this, you'll actually do this and wiggle your way there. But I like the fact that you're willing to learn and improve. And actually it did get, and I was like, in my head, I'm thinking, no. You don't know me. I would not wiggle. I'll be going straight from A to B. And it got to the stage where I went to hire, after that very successful seed round, when I got, he then introduced me to some other people, and I got great investors on board, and quite a nice small cap table of just strategic people. When it came next time to raise, and I still hadn't monetized, because that's what I'd always said, I wasn't going to monetize. It was a data player. We're going to keep gathering that data. And I was like, you know what? The market's changed. We're no longer in that place where, Silicon Valley vibes, you can raise tons of money on a data player loan with no intention of monetizing any time in the near future. And I thought back to that original conversation. I thought, I've got to walk into this office with them and I have to say, look, I think I had the wrong strategy. And I think I need to, sort of not pivot, but repurpose and actually think about how we monetize this. And it was that conversation that really came into my mind when I thought, that's what he liked about me. And when I said, look, what you liked about me is that I was adaptable. That was the big word you used, because I was adaptable and I was willing to adapt and to learn. I'm adapting, I've learned, and please back me to do this. And I believe this is the way to do it. I think community engagement is only becoming more important. Planning is becoming more political. This is a space that's going to blow up in the next couple of years, which is exactly what it's now done. Thank God. and please back me to do this. And so they did sort of put some more money in for me to build the technology to do the community engagement on top of that layer, on top of what we were doing. And I'm so grateful, because then when it came time to raise this time, we were oversubscribed and we had all the metrics and we were on the right track. And God, the difference when you're on the right track of fundraising versus trying when you're not is, it was a really dark, stressful time. And I did think back to that original funding conversation and what are your strengths? And it's not always being right. Sometimes your strength is knowing when, are you being stubborn because you are resilient and you're willing to fight through? And there's so much of this whole, sort of culture in startups of being like, you have to be willing to work 90-hour weeks and you're always grinding and no one believes in you, but you keep on going. That's what I thought I was doing. But actually what I was doing was actually letting my ego play a part and wanting my original pristine vision not to change, not have to do that tax, sort of that tacking and jiving during getting to B from A. And that was probably the most pivotal moment of my journey, is realizing that ego and resilience are not the same thing.
Yes, that's very, very astute of you, actually. A couple of other points I picked up there. I mean, you said about hustle. I mean, you've got to hustle. You've got to get kind of comfortable with just banging on doors and being prepared to get no's, haven't you?
And I'm really not good at it, if I'm honest. Actually, Nick Lesler, one of my investors, he was voted #1 on the Property Week Power List. And in it, they talked about how he'd invested in BuiltID as one of the key things he'd done that year. And he said, I back Savannah and I love her because she's a hustler. And I read it and I was like, that's a bit insulting.
Exactly.
I was like, I don't know if I like the thought of being called a hustler. It tears my soul apart. I hate asking for things. Fundraising is my worst nightmare. I've been into so many fundraising meetings where I've not had the heart to say, are you interested in investing? And instead of being like, thank you so much for your advice. Good day. It doesn't come naturally to me, but you're right. It's key. You can't get anywhere without it.
Can't get away from it. But to be honest with you, the more you do it, the more comfortable you get, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing you said, which I think is worth sort of pointing out, is this thing about the 10-second pitch and how critical that is, because you just never know when you're going to meet someone interesting. And like you said, you didn't really know this guy was super influential in the property sector and investment when you did that. So, and I speak to so many entrepreneurs who struggle with that 10-second pitch, and I think you've got to get that absolutely bang on.
Absolutely. And I think it's something that I went through, typing up so many different versions and what was I going to say and how was I going to get across it. And I think there can't be one. So I knew, at least, if I didn't realize how successful he was, I knew that he was a property, magnate. I knew he was in that industry. And therefore I went for, this is the pain point. So immediately in that first sentence, there's a nod of, that's right, that is a pain point. And this is how we're going to transform it. And I think a mistake that I often have to control myself from making is that I'm so passionate about my product and I love it so much that I want to spend hours tattling on about the product itself. What people actually care about is, what are you solving and what are the outcomes? The actual product itself isn't as interesting to other people as it is to you, which was a heartbreaking thing to realize.
Absolutely. It's very, very easy as an entrepreneur to kind of get carried away with talking about your baby and how beautiful your baby is and amazing and all the features and the colours and all that kind of stuff. Nobody gives a monkeys. They want to know, what's in it for me? What's the outcome? Not the outcome for an investor, but the outcome for your customers and your clients that you're dealing with.
It's all about the KPIs.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. And in terms of, I mean, given that you've got a kind of social angle to your business, did you come across any challenges on that with raising investment, or was that actually something that helped you with your story, do you think?
I don't know if at this stage, I don't think it helped or hindered. I do think that in the past, it would probably have made people raise their eyebrows, and increasingly, especially in the property industry, you know, sort of social impact and corporate social responsibility is becoming far more important, and it's now actually a topic of conversation at most conferences, where even 2 years ago, it was an afterthought. So I do think we're at the right time to be prioritizing that. I wouldn't say it really helped in this round, but I think that in the future, I hope it will become more important, and it will be more valuable, that that's something that we really stick to, and we really fight for it as well. Not everyone wants to have that social impact side, and for us, it's like you take us with it or you don't take us at all. You have to be choosy about clients.
I think investors generally are getting more interested in that, because they know that that's what consumers and businesses are interested in. It's really taking off, and it feels like now there is very little that's just a social impact business, because every business is starting to embrace that. It's becoming the benchmark, you know, the entry level point.
Absolutely.
So you've done sort of quite a number of kind of small rounds, and then let's talk about the last round, which was a chunkier one.
I would still say it was sort of a bridge round, so it was 2 million, but it's still sort of like a baby bridge. So our seed round was a proper round, where we raised like 1.1. And before that, we'd raised, some money in dollars, and we've raised a bit since but from an internal round. So it's our first external round since our seed one. And like I said, we're very, very fortunate to be oversubscribed for it, but it was really about choosing the right strategic partners to get us to the point where we do a proper round. Yeah. So we didn't take all the money that was offered, because we just needed that bump as such to get us into 18 months time. We're ready for international expansion on a major scale, and knowing that we had the right partners in place for that. So one of our investors is Mott MacDonald, who are an international engineering firm who work, I think around like 150 offices around the world. And for me, what was really interesting is not just that they have that scale and they can roll us out for their clients in all those markets, but also that they'd actually already done a exercise. They'd gone to their 30 biggest clients around the world and said, what are the key challenges facing your business that you need help addressing? What's facing you? And one of the ones they identified was community engagement. So before they ever even knew we existed, so that's why they approached us, is because they'd already identified that the problem we were solving was the problem their clients were facing. And so for me, they were just a no-brainer as an investor to have someone who's aligned with what you're trying to achieve, rather than just with a financial return. For me, that made them 10 times more appealing than a traditional VC.
Absolutely. I mean, for most of our female founders listening, I'm sure they would die to be in the position of being oversubscribed for a round, right?
It helped my previous client apply. It was absolute hell, and I wanted to cut up into a ball and never say again. And I was miserable. I really can't. I think it's so easy for us to focus on like the positives and the successes and how great we are, and forget that like I find it much more comforting, rather than hearing something inspirational about someone doing well at something, to hear they also had those moments where they're like, I am worthless and I'm never going to make this work. And oh my God, all these people have put their trust in me, both employees and investors. And I don't know if I'm going to, be able to make it into all the amazing potential it has. So no, it's a great position to be in, but by no means do I take it for granted. It can just as easy as it goes up, it can go down again, and hopefully up again and down again, up again. But
so
yeah.
on that sort of earlier round where you felt like sort of curling up into a ball and dying, how did you deal with that? How did you deal with those ups and downs in the process?
Terrible at fundraising. I didn't have any connections. I didn't know how to open those doors. I was sending cold emails to VCs who obviously all ignored them. Every time I did meet with someone, they either only invested at seed round or they only invested at Series A. And I was this ugly duckling between the two, where I had too much traction really to be seed, but I hadn't monetized, so I didn't have enough to be Series A. And it was just soul destroying. And I don't think I did crack it. And I think this time I got lucky. And I made sure that I worked like hell. I knew what I needed to get in terms of traction before I started fundraising. And I just had to steel myself and, gird all my loins to ask people for introductions. And I hate doing that, but you have to.
But maybe you learned a lot of mistakes in that first round that you then put into practice now. I mean, I think...
Yeah, which were kind of like, suck it up.
But it's a common story, and I think when you look at kind of back at some of the things you might have done differently, in terms of speaking to the right people or getting the confidence to ask for intros, all those kind of things. If you were to go back and do it again, what do you think you would do differently?
I would do what I did, which was the real turning point for me, which was get a professional coach. And it's expensive, but it is worth every penny. So I see my professional coach once a quarter, and she is incredible. And I probably rely on her way more than I should for far more than just business. But just having someone, especially as a solo founder, it's very lonely, and you have to bear that responsibility and those stresses yourself, because your team need to stay focused on delivering results and feeling like they're going in the right direction. So it's very, very lonely, and your friends can't really get it. They want to, and they're sympathetic shoulders to lean on, but you can only lean so much. And having someone there to bounce off and to understand the different logic behind the decisions I was making and where I wanted to go was really, really important. And it's not like they tell you the answers, they just help you figure out what you already probably knew deep down. And so that's what I would do differently, is I would invest in a professional coach, far earlier than I did. And like I said, I see her quarterly before my board meeting. It's not like it's a regular thing. And every time I go into that board meeting, more prepared and ready to smash it because I've seen her.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, obviously I would clearly concur with that, being a fundraising coach myself, and I think if you can find somebody to support you through that process and shortcut things, and I mean, it's not, as you say, it's not just about understanding how it all works and helping you with the skills to do it, but it's about that sounding board, isn't it, along the way, so that because it's a lonely place running a business at the best of times, never mind when you're in the middle of a fundraise. It is really, really challenging.
And it's just delving into questions like, why do you hate asking people for money? Why do you hate asking people for help, full stop? All those things, like, what's the worst that can happen is they say no. And is that so bad? Is it not worse than feeling like a failure because you never picked up the courage to ask? I couldn't recommend having people to help coach you in those tough times, and the good times more. I think just as much in the good.
So, I mean, I know that you mentioned at the beginning that the property sector is a very male-dominated industry. Did you find that also when you were speaking to investors? I was just intrigued to know, whether you didn't meet many female investors along the way, and whether you saw a difference between speaking with the guys, speaking with the female investors, or did you feel there wasn't a difference?
To be honest, I think for me, because I've spent my whole career in a male-dominated industry and been nearly always the only woman around the table, I was pretty well versed in speaking to men and having to sell it in the way you have to them. I think there's now female centric VCs popping up, which is fantastic, and I think that's awesome. And I actually think Albright is obviously where we first connected, and I thought that's an amazing initiative that they ran these pitch days for female founders, and it was the most supportive environment. And I walked out of it being like, that was awesome. And that made a real difference to my confidence, if nothing else. I didn't actually end up going for any of the investment that was interested out of that, but just the confidence of being like, there's this sisterhood, even if you don't always see it, is awesome. I think it's worth noting that both property and tech is not just male dominated, it's also, sort of dominated by people who are from white middle class backgrounds. So I think that I didn't have to deal with a lot of the challenges and struggles that a lot of women trying to fundraise have to deal with, and I'm very cognizant of that. So no, for me, I don't think it made a difference, but probably just because I've never known any different. I've never worked in a female dominated industry, or even a, sort of well-represented industry.
I think that's a theme that I've definitely seen over the last year doing all these podcast interviews, is that those women who have come from a background where they have been used to working in a male-dominated industry don't see it being a challenge as much as those women who've come from a background where they're just not used to dealing with men. And I'm really seeing that as a very strong theme that's coming out. I mean, have you got any advice to give to those women who might see it as being more intimidating? How could they go about it differently so they don't let this idea that being a female founder will hold them back?
Honestly, I don't really know what the recipe for success is. I think that, like I said, I think the fact that there are more female-centric VCs cropping up is a really good thing, because at least then you can help get, female founders' confidence up to go into those more male-dominated environments. I think that we always, you do to an extent, sadly, have to put on a bit of a persona, and maybe portray a sense of confidence and assertiveness that you don't feel. I'm a big believer in faking it till you make it, and I still don't think I've made it. I'm still faking it, and I think that's being comfortable with that. So no, I don't think any of that is probably very useful advice. I don't know. I wish someone would tell me.
It's tough, isn't it? I mean, I mean, do you have any kind of thoughts as to a couple of things that you would say to people, advice about how to go out and approach a fundraising round?
I think you have to leave your ego and your sense of shame at the door, and be willing to ask people for intros and to help you meet people that it makes you feel a bit uncomfortable asking. You have to just buck up and do it. I think being really well prepared before you start already having your 5-year financial projections done, and also making sure they're realistic. I think you've got to go in. I think the difference this round is I went into the mentality of, I know where we're going, I know what we're doing, and if you don't want to be part of this journey, then you're not the right investor for me, rather than I'm not the right investee for you. And I think having that mentality shift, again, fake that mentality if you don't have it yet, made a huge difference. Actually being able to say, I know I'm open to ideas, but equally I know what our key metrics are and what we're working towards. And if that doesn't align with your fund and where it's going and what you need to get out of it, I met with one VC who was really keen, and she was like, but could you actually just tweak the financials to say it's like 200 year-on-year growth or something? I was like, but that's not what I'm projecting. She's like, no, but I need that obviously for the DD. And I'm like, but that's not realistic. Are you then going to be holding me to those projections? That actually what you're then going to be expecting? Accepting that you're not the right business for everyone, I think, is another way to make the process a lot less painful.
That mindset shift, I think it's fundamental.
Absolutely.
To me, you get that mindset right about who you are, where you're going, what you're trying to achieve, and see it as finding investors that fit with that rather than feeling like you're going with a begging bowl. It just makes all the difference.
Absolutely.
Exciting. So what is next for BuiltID? Where are you taking it next? Do you think you're going to, you mentioned doing another raise. How is that going to be on the agenda for 2020, or do you think it's going to be a bit?
No, certainly not for 2020. So 2020 is all about consolidating our position, considering to deliver fantastic results, and working on all the highest profile projects to let communities have more of a voice. So we have a very clear mission statement. We know where we want to go, and we know that in 18 months' time we want to be ready to have the proof points already internationally to roll this out on a global scale, and be the go-to platform for engaging communities in whatever context. So we know where we're heading, and the team is scaling fast, and that's kind of scary, if I'm honest. But I think as long as we can hold on to that ethos of who we are, that we're underdogs, we're hustlers, we'll go 110% every single day on everything we do, and to deliver the best results for our clients, and having that sense of responsibility. Those are the big things that I'm more concerned about focusing on in 2020. The business is growing kind of of its own accord now, which is great, but that will stop if we don't keep those fundamental cultural principles alive.
Yeah, it's scary, isn't it? I think a lot of people think that once they've raised investment, all their problems are over. They just on to the next level of challenges, which will come thick and fast, don't they? Once you on that route to scale. Yeah, good. Well, I wish you all the best. Super I love what you're doing. It's great to see a female founder doing something really innovative in the proptech sector. And I'm sure you're on the path for global domination very soon.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Yeah, real pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you, Savannah. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for following Fundraising Stories with Female Founders. This content is all provided to you for free, so if you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe so you never miss another one. Enter the Arena has helped hundreds of female founders fly through pre-raise and investment and onto the exponential growth of their business. Our first-hand experience, expert guidance, and proven programs help female founders unleash the Wonder Woman inside. To see if we can help you do the same, head over to www.enterthearena.co.uk. I'm Julia Elliott Brown, and I look forward to talking with you soon.